All right. So I am here with
Michael Todd Gallowglas. I publish under the fancy nom de plume M. Todd Gallowglas.
excellent. Now, humor me for a moment.
Always.
How do you define a writer?
How do I define a writer? Allow me to answer your question with a question. Are we differentiating between writer and author?
I don't know. Are you? As he answers a question with your question.
It's your interview, so I am trusting you to be specific. So, are for the purposes of the framework of the conversation you're starting, are we differentiating between author? I'm going to make you answer the question. Are we differentiating between author and writer?
So the next question for you I have is, all right, we'll differentiate, but we may come back to it.
Okay. So we are working under the premise that a writer is and author are different aspects of the same endeavor.
Yeah.
Okay. Then for me, a writer is someone who writes. It's no matter what their medium is, and I get this, and I get this a lot at conventions and other things where people say, well, I want to be a writer. So I said, well, why don't you? And they said, well, I don't know publishing. I said, one's got nothing to do with the other. Do you create words? Do you put words in order to create something? And they go, yeah, well, then you're a writer. Own it. If you need permission, I give you permission to call yourself a writer. And I think that's one of the great disservices that we have culturally done to those who want to write, but also to those who talk to those who want to write, because it's that we keep hearing the don't quit your day job. Oh, it's this mystical thing that like people like J.K. Rowling and George R. R. Martin and Stephen King and all those people, they do that. You lowly person, you don't write. Go do something worthwhile. And we should be okay with writing for the sake of writing. Case in point, one of the people involved in this conversation a few days ago may or may not have stated that he does or does not care about ever getting paid for his work.
Yeah, true.
And because you write voraciously, you don't worry about getting paid for it, but do you find joy in it?
Oh yeah. No, it's I see where you're going with that.
Right.
And I do find joy, and also joy.
Yeah. And you have an audience of people that keep reading your stuff and nominating you for prestigious awards.
The use of the word prestigious is new to me, so I'll accept it.
Well, how many
this?
You like that one right there? Yes.
Well, let me make sure it's nice, and there we go.
See how you like how I worked that away around so that you could bring out for those of you who are only hearing the audio, Chris was polishing up his Hugo Award rocket.
Yes, using a blanket. Which I don't keep around just to polish it. I want that to be that one is in the living room. Now
okay, so have I sufficiently answered the writer question?
You have. Now here's where it gets hard.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes. I am prepared.
What do you think of when I say a storyteller?
Ooh, see, now you're going to my roots, right?
I dig.
Okay. So for those of you listening to the audio and don't know, I got my start as an oral storytelling at Renaissance fairs and performed off and on there for the better part of 3 decades. So human beings are storytellers. We are all storytellers. And we kind of get that beaten out of us to one extent or another, but we are born trying to explain stuff with stories. And one of the examples that I use is, if you don't believe me, go to any home anywhere in the world where something breaks and the parents aren't around to see it break, especially if there's more than one child in the home, you will see some of the greatest storytelling in the history of mankind. But we tell stories around around the coffee maker, the water cooler, out at bars. That's what we do. We tell stories to each other. It's really the oldest entertainment is us, is human beings explaining shit to other human beings in an interesting way.
All right. Now, here's the really hard one.
Okay.
Is there a difference in the way that you, as a storyteller and a writer, approach telling the story?
In different mediums?
No.
All right. So you're going to have to clarify that. So
when you are telling a story as a storyteller.
Yes. Like in front of an audience.
In front of an audience.
Right.
So I guess actually you did answer one of the questions then, because you see you're obviously saying that there is a difference there between them, between the types of stories.
Whether I'm telling a story verbally and whether I am writing a story, there's absolutely a difference. It's the different performance mediums. For example, so let's just talk about a couple of different types of storytelling. One, there's the live story where I'm just telling the story, right? I have different tools at my disposal with that. I have the inflection of my voice. I can do the expressions on my face. I can move around. I can use props. So, which I don't have any of that when I'm writing. So if I'm writing a story and I have a character make an expression, I have to write that. I can't just make the expression and have my audience understand. Right. So there's different. So the same thing, like, say if we're talking about theater or a movie, we have they have the option of multiple actors playing different characters. So there's a wider range of breadth. But on the other hand, when I'm telling my stories, I don't have to get in sync with another actor. It's just me, right? So I don't have the challenge of playing nice or upstage. I don't have to worry about, okay, are they going to blow the line? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, cool. So have I answered that question sufficiently for you, sir?
Yes.
Awesome.
Now, in your storytelling and your writing,
yes,
let's call it your oeuvre.
My oeuvre?
Sure.
Okay.
I just like words.
Is that a word?
Actually, yes, it is.
What? I have never experienced this word before. Explain this word to me.
Oeuvre, the canon of a individual and or group.
Okay. My oeuvre. Yes, excellent. Okay, my oeuvre.
Basically your stuff.
Yeah, my stuff. Cool. The creative the body of creative works of one Michael Todd Gallowglas.
Correct.
I like that I had to make you think. That is my Tuesday is complete to make you watch you do the eye thing that you do when you're thinking. Like, I'm like, okay, good. I can go now. All right. So your question, sir.
So how does your storytelling persona and your writer persona feed off one another?
Oh, that's an amazing question. And I've never had somebody I've never had somebody ask it in exactly that way. They'll ask, how does your storytelling influence your writing? Which of course it does, but not how the two personas mesh. Or it's so ooh, I don't know that I've ever quite thought about it in that way. I don't know that this, aside from having an ear for how the ear for how language works when I'm composing, like when I'm actually sitting at the keyboard creating words in order to hopefully one day be able to turn those into something worth publishing. I have a greater sense of the sound inside my head, so that I'm, a lot of writers will say, hey, you got to go read your stuff out loud to make sure. For me, I don't have to do that, because that's just naturally that's how the echo chamber in my head works, as I hear the words as if I'm speaking them. And because of that, I'm also very cognizant of of dialogue, different characters having a different sound without having to sound it out and everything like that. The way that I would say my that they feed off of each other is, I would say, when I'm at an event as an author, I very much have a persona. There's very definitely, it's mellowed over the last couple of years as I've come to terms with stuff about myself and everything, and I'm becoming more secure with myself as the professional writer, author, person. But yeah, I would say that it's very much, especially when I'm at doing panels or presentations or things, that very much there's a persona of that the storyteller comes out because of the showmanship of that. And it's also given me sort of this shamelessness of being able to promote myself that and my books at any given moment when the situation calls for it, that I believe is only dwarfed by Daryl Schweitzer.
Schweitzer's pretty good at it.
There is I can guarantee you there is there's a bit of Gallowglas in his 20s watching Schweitzer at conventions and going, oh yes, we're going to take some of that. There's definitely some Schweitzerism, also some Harlan Ellisonisms, because Harlan was also pretty shameless.
Oh yeah.
So it's so I don't have so much of the persona aspect in the composition, but these days, with the way the world works and the way media works these days, it is not enough for a writer to just be a great writer. They also have to be good in front of people, whether it's in front of people on the internet or in front of people in person. It's being a writer, kind of, you create sort of this performance art about yourself.
Yes, like Chuck Tingle.
Like talk about a dude or a chick or whatever Chuck Tingle is, the force of nature that Chuck Tingle is onto interwebs. Yes, Chuck Tingle is the winner of the author performance art game, and I think I know who it is. I think I know who Chuck is.
Chuck is Chuck.
Chuck, yes.
One of the best times at the Worldcon in San Jose was getting to meet Zoe Quinn. I'd never met her and was really excited and said, yeah, so I'm accepting for Chuck too. And I was kind of hoping he would show up because I wanted to see what he would wear. And I was like, it would be the gi, the bag, and a bow tie. It's obvious. Yes. Now, how long have you actually been around this whole science fiction thing?
So are we when you say science fiction, are we talking speculative literature or specifically science fiction?
Ooh, you're all about the solidifying of questions.
Well, I want to give it an honest answer to it, because I want to answer it succinctly.
Let's start with one and go. Let's start with the macro and go to the micro. So how long have you been around speculative fiction?
Okay, speculative literature.
God damn you.
You come on, you had to know that this was
I kind of figured it would.
Come on. Like, the longer we ever interact together, the sillier and more it just gets. Summer after second grade, I read because I think I saw Star Wars before. Yeah, Star Wars. It was Star Wars. I saw Star Wars in 1977. I was 5 years old. Changed my life.
I didn't realize you were 2 years older than me.
So,
I feel inferior.
Yeah, I was born in 72. Star Wars came out in 77. Watched it. It just, when that Carillion cruiser came over, changed my life. And then the next big moment, and that was the visual. Then shortly thereafter, I think it was the summer of second grade, first or second grade. I can't remember exactly when. I started reading Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh, wow. Which I have still never read.
I don't know. I used to say it, know the roots and everything, read it, but now there's so much good literature out there that it's,
Yeah, I think like a few of the things that when I have revisited and have been like, my personal favorite when I was a kid was a thing called Sherlock Bones.
Okay.
And it was wait for it, dog who was a detective.
Okay. And then you went back to it?
I went back to it, and one, either I was a really dumb kid, highly possible, that means my parents would be correct, or two, and more likely, it just really decided it didn't want to be anything more than what it was. Right. And that's absolutely fine, I think.
Right.
But my kids are still a little young for it. Or it'd be like, read these, and you're going to become a true crime nerd. So excellent. Yes. Now, let's talk fantasy for a second.
Okay.
So, in your head, give me a quick, dirty definition of fantasy to you.
Oh, Jesus. A quick, dirty definition of fantasy, huh? Define dirty.
I amend my last statement. Give me a succinct.
And this is without even any whiskey. Definition of fantasy is God, put me on the spot. I don't know that I have one. At least not one that I've ever thought about. Are you going to put me on the spot and make me answer it?
No, you know what I'm going to do instead?
Sure. What?
I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, which will give you the answer to your previous question.
Okay.
So, having said that fantasy is a set of expectations which don't necessarily match the world of our own.
Okay. I don't believe I said that, but okay.
No, you did.
Did
Yeah.
I?
Yeah, totally.
So we're gaslighting me in this interview now then.
The funny thing is you did actually say that.
Did
when
I?
asked you while we were drinking at Bacon.
Okay.
60,
All right.
70?
Okay, so all right. Okay, so now okay, cool. Okay, so I said that. Sure. It sounds kind of smart, so I'll take it. All right.
Have you ever tried to develop something, a world, a story, anything, where just the fantastic was too much?
I don't think so. I want to. See, I would love to have that where I would love to have that moment where I realized I have gone too far adrift into the fantastical, because I think that's fantasy writers limit themselves way too much. I wrote an essay in my MFA in fiction titled "Why Isn't Fantasy More Fantastical?" And I firmly believe, and the reason I think that so, and I want to actually study this as a PhD, by reading a lot of stuff. But I think that the greatest detriment to fantastical literature is fantasy authors, contemporary fantasy authors, because what I'm finding as I go around and I talk to people, what I'm finding is most contemporary fantasy authors are inspired to write fantasy by the books that they read when they were kids, because they grew up reading fantasy books and playing video games and Dungeons and Dragons. They don't read why. The reason why Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Robert Howard and in some cases even Fritz Lieber and M. John Harrison. Oh my God, M. John Harrison.
Yes.
That they came up with these really great wonders. Like, where did they come up with this stuff? Is because they were reading widely across everything rather than, and they were reading beautiful literature across poetry and all sorts of fiction and myths and legends. And now we've got 2.5 generations of fantasy writers that grew up like, I'm going to be a fantasy writer. And they don't read widely enough outside of everything or outside of the genre. So that, as I said, their influences are role-playing games, video games, and fantasy. And we should be in this, like, if we had continued on as fantasists, absorbing everything around us, we should be in, like, we should have splintered out into the winds. But even like the two really biggest in the last, the biggest names in fantasy right now that are still going, that people talk about. You've got Pat Rothfuss, name it, the Kingkiller Chronicles, and George R.R. Martin, which are still largely derivative of Tolkien. It's there's, and we should be breaking ground. We should be shocked. We should have that shocking thing that comes out like, oh my God, every year or two, and everybody's like, oh, this is the same. I've read this before.
I think one of the ways I've heard it described recently was that every generation since 75, I think they used, or actually maybe it was since Tolkien died,
Okay.
has merely been sharpening the stick that Tolkien beat us with.
And that, that I believe that. Now there are some people, some writers are starting to deviate from that. Like, I'm a huge Steven Erikson fanboy for the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is like, oh, this is the thing that I'm talking about. We should be doing this and more. So I just want more weird. I want fantasy that doesn't reek of medieval Europe at all. And it's getting to the point where I want fantasy that doesn't even necessarily seem like Earth anything.
Interesting.
I'm not going to call him out by name because I don't want his fans to come after me. But there's a writer who's done some of that, but it's basically it's all window dressing. There's a world that he's invented that has other things, but it's like, oh, that's just a horse in a different costume. Right? Rather than, no, let's create this really interesting new type of existence. Or let's bring it to Earth and make it not like urban fantasy, but like the weird stuff that Tim Powers does. Oh my gosh.
I got an email from him today.
You got an email from Tim Powers?
Yeah, we're doing an issue of Journey Planet, and he said, "Oh, it sounds like a great idea." And I said, "Can I interview you?" And he hasn't gotten back yet, but
cool.
Awesome. He's the whole reason I have my breakdown on stage, right?
Uh-huh.
It was all him, all his fault. Sticking to that.
Okay.
Now, big question here. Tell me about Halloween Jack.
What do you want to know about Halloween Jack?
Just, let's say I've never heard of Halloween Jack. What do you say to get me to buy your books?
Okay, so the Halloween Jack series is the continuation of my favorite Irish legend about Halloween with a steampunk upgrade. So think Jules Verne meets Irish folklore, because the original story, and it's also a continuation of one of the stories I tell at my storytelling show occasionally, about Jack O'Lantern, and it's an old Irish. The Irish are the ones that invented jack-o'-lanterns. They were originally turnips, and Googled
You're right.
Jack-o'-lanterns, and it's like, yeah, if I was a demon and I saw that outside of somebody's house, I'm not going in that house because they're terrifying. And so the old legend is, there's the variations of the legend all over, but there's a guy, Jack, and he, during his life, he pisses off the devil so bad that when Jack dies, he has to go to hell because he also did stuff that he can't get into heaven. And the devil says, no, you can't come in here. And so he creates a lantern out of this thing. He says, well, see this, that's me. And the devil says, oh, I'm going to get rid of it. So spoiler for parts of the legend, but it's a legend. So I think the statute of limitations on spoilers is, it's old. The original legend is older than Christianity. So,
well, there you go.
But anyway, so I was like, back in 2011, and I was first self-publishing. I was like, I need to do something to tie in specifically with my storytelling show. And so I said, oh, I'll write the sequel to that. And so I wrote the sequel to that, in which case there's sort of a passing of the torch to a new character. So Jack of the Lantern, through that, sort of there's a passing of the torch to a new character, Halloween Jack. And then by the end of that, it becomes more of an ensemble cast. The ensemble grows in the second one. And in the middle of the third one, which is taking longer than I thought it was going to, both the cover is proving challenging because I'm not dealing with Northern European folklore anymore. I'm drawing on Chinese folklore because it's the New Year's story. So each story in the Halloween Jack series is focused on a different holiday. So Halloween Jack and the Devil's Gate is the Halloween story. Halloween Jack and the Curse of Frost is the Christmas story. Mm-hmm. Focuses largely on the Jack Frost legend. And I also, without ever mentioning it in the book, the entire MacGuffin of me writing that book is paying homage to the phrase "a cold day in hell." So with Halloween Jack and the Red Emperors, it's the New Year's story, and Halloween is Samhain is Celtic New Year's, and then there's our normal New Year's, and then Chinese New Year's, and so I'm playing with various New Year's traditions, and and this isn't too much of a spoiler because the creature shows up in the very first chapter. The major bad guy in Halloween Jack and the Red Emperors is the monster that was the inspiration for Chinese New Year's.
No, cool. I like that. So, I want to see that. You have to finish it now.
Yeah. Okay.
Now go.
Done. No. So, but because of the current, like, I believe that any writer should be able to write anything they want. The trouble is so many cultures have been appropriated by Western culture and just said, "Oh, I like this, and I'm just going to do whatever I want with it." And sometimes I think I'm erring too much on the side of caution to where it's kind of paralyzed me, because I want to be respectful of these legends from these other cultures, but I think it's important for me as I go through the rest of the series, having these cultures these traditions butt up against each other, and that's one of the themes is because no, that's too much of a spoiler for book one. So, but I like, not because the Halloween Jack books are set in the late 19th century, during a lot of the aftermath of colonialism. What happened? One of the questions I'm exploring is what happens when these different folkloric traditions butt heads. And so in the opening for Halloween Jack and the Red Emperors, it opens in San Francisco in the late 1800s, and they through the action they get into Chinatown, and the folkloric figures, the humans that are on the good guys' side don't have a problem when they get into Chinatown, but the folkloric figures, the mythos people, suddenly have a problem when they get into Chinatown because the rules have changed.
Oh, interesting.
And so so, you know, and the other thing that because the major bad guy in the first two Halloween Jack books is the devil.
Yeah.
I'm really, really, really careful. I'm being very, 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 very careful for these antagonists. I don't want to call them villains because they have their own agendas and everything like that. But the antagonists from Asian folklore that show up in this book, I don't want them to just be another duality of good and evil, because they're not specifically good or evil in the Chinese folklore and the Chinese traditions. And so I'm very careful not to paint them as that. The other thing is one of the representation that I give for the devil is one of his greatest his greatest foibles is his pride. He's full of himself. I'm the devil. And whereas mythic creatures have a sense of pride because they're these mythic creatures that have lived forever and everything like that, showing this pride and this confidence in themselves, I work really hard to make sure that it's shown differently, and it creates these different kinds of personality conflicts, and and so that the outcome so that they provide different challenges for my heroes, and that they can't defeat these, they can't come out on top of this antagonism or this conflict in the same way, that they have to step outside of their wheelhouse, and they have to learn something about the experience of these other things. And another thing, no, I'm not going to go into that. Because there's another aspect of the Halloween Jack books that is kind of problematic, but I haven't worked out the solution, so I don't want to start. And that's one that just came out the last couple of days. I said, oh, that's a thing that I got to work on, and so that's still on my back burner. Cool. So that's Halloween Jack. Did I answer that sufficiently for you?
Yes. All right, now a stress question.
Okay.
When you're writing, are you one of the ones who dives headfirst into stuff that feels like what you're writing, or the ones who goes completely away from it with their reading?
What do you mean?
So you're writing something. Mm-hmm. Are you going to read things that are in that realm, or are you going to stay as far away from it as possible?
Well, since nobody writes stuff like I do, I can't read stuff that's like what I do.
That's fair enough.
Right. So, but and largely these days, I don't read, like, I've really stopped reading a lot of fantasy. Like, I'll pick up fantasy books, and I'll give it like 3 chapters, and then I'll go, oh no, I've read this before, I can see where this is going, and then I'll just put it aside, because I've read that. The magic is different, the names are kind of different, but there's this big bad that we got to go do the MacGuffin thing to defeat the guy, or everybody's a bastard to each other because we all want to have the throne or the thing or get the title, or I'm tired of those things. So I am reading right now. I'm in the middle of The Empires of Dust, I think it's called, the series title by Anna Smith Sparks. The first one is Court of Broken Knives, I thought it was awesome. It's grimdark, and I'm not really a grimdark guy, but she did some really, really interesting things. And so I'm in the middle of the second book of that series. And it's different enough for what I do in fantasy. And it's pushing boundaries and stuff within the fantastical literature that it's intriguing to me, so I'm going to keep going. And Anna is just a fantastic human being. But because I'm in my second MFA this time for poetry, I'm reading a lot of poetry. But these days I read a lot of more speculative literary fiction. Like, it's time for me to at some point reread Visit from the Goon Squad, which is kind of science fiction-y. It's just so good. It's my favorite all-time favorite book.
Have you read the Glass Bead Game yet?
No, I haven't even heard of it.
Oh, you've never heard of it? It's Herman Hesse. the Glass Bead game.
Okay.
It's Hermann Hesse. It is specifically what was named when he won his Nobel Prize.
Okay.
And it's the world is basically run by and off of this game. And it's fascinating. It's one of those times when literary specfic feels, I don't want to say honest, but it feels like what Hesse was writing was actually meant to fulfill the things that science fiction does.
Okay. So
In the same way that
by
Vonnegut
who?
didn't.
By Hermann Hesse?
Hermann Hesse, yeah.
Okay, cool. It's on my list now.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good one.